Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. It's National Prom Day, Tony. Do you remember your prom?
Tony Kornheiser, absolutely. I took my classmate, Amelia Earhart.
Oh,
I said to her, Amy.
I was going to start counting
I
back
used to call her Amy.
decades, but,
No,
you know.
I called her Amy. I said, Amy, you got to keep your feet on the ground. And whatever else you do, you got to keep your feet on the ground. No.
Yeah. That was a thing. You're dating yourself. That was a thing 50, 60 years ago. Nobody understands what you're talking about now. You got to be 60 to get the keep your feet on the ground reference.
This was 80 years ago. What are you talking about? Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. In today's episode, the Celtics blow out the Bucks. Saudi Tour golfers feel they have something to prove at the Masters, and Jay Billis joins us for 5 good minutes. But we begin today with a comparison of the men's and women's Final Fours. The favorite in the men's tournament is Connecticut, which plays Miami tomorrow night. The favorite in the women's tournament is defending champion and unbeaten South Carolina, which plays Iowa and Caitlin Clark tonight. Wilbon, which favorite is most vulnerable to you?
You know, Tony, I don't know enough about the 4 men's team. I don't care what Vegas says. I don't look at the field and see a favorite. I guess UConn because of what they've done to non-conference teams. I don't see some heavy favorite there. South Carolina is a heavy favorite. Are they vulnerable? I think you're vulnerable anytime you have to go against a truly great player, a player who's the outstanding player of the season. So if you go back and you look at great men's tournaments like Michigan State against Larry Bird, were they vulnerable, Michigan State? You know, Magic Johnson and Greg Kelser and Jay Vincent to Larry Bird? Yeah, they were. That game came down to fairly late. And so you get that. You get Luka Doncic in Phoenix last year, the #1 seed in the Suns, and they lost Luka Doncic. So if that's the case, if I'm going to use that as the basis for my answer, I'm going to say South Carolina. While I think South Carolina is a big and legitimate favorite, I've watched Caitlin Clark all year long, and I think she can take out almost anybody. So I'm going to say South Carolina's a little vulnerable. I think anybody would be to her.
So I would love to say South Carolina because I think it would be a great story if Caitlin Clark had the game of her life, which is saying something because she had a 40-point triple-double the other day, and she took South Carolina, an unbeaten team, and took them out. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I will go back to that exact game of Michigan State and Magic Johnson against Indiana State and Larry Bird, which ends up at a 15 or 20-point game. That's what I think is going to happen.
Was it?
Yes, it was.
It was like
South Carolina is a
game,
much
right?
15 or 20. South Carolina is a much more powerful team, and I don't think that Iowa and Caitlin Clark are prepared for how big and strong and defensive-minded South Carolina is. So that leaves me in a default position to say that I think UConn is more vulnerable, even though UConn has been every bit as impressive as South Carolina. They both are plus 90 after 4 games in their respective tournaments.
Yeah,
and I could make a better case for UConn because as a 4 seed, they probably had tougher competition to some point than South Carolina as a 1. The only thing I can say about this is Miami, I think, is 27-8 on the year, or maybe 29-7. Yeah, that's right. And UConn is 29-8, and Miami took out a 1 and a 2. And UConn took out an 8 and a 3. I could talk myself into this, Mike, but I don't think either is particularly vulnerable. I don't.
Yeah, Tony, let me just add a little postscript here. Iowa can play, period. It's just not – Caitlin Clark's not the only – she may be the only great player, but they know how to play off of her. And South Carolina, which is the best defensive team out there, they're going to have one of their best defensive games. Otherwise, Tony, Iowa's – team will shred you. They will. They got shooters everywhere. They know how to play off Caitlin Clark. I think you're sort of underestimating her, them, not her. I know you wouldn't underestimate Caitlin Clark, but I think you're sort of underestimating the Hawkeyes and what kind of team they have. We'll see tonight. Exciting time to be watching that game in a couple of hours. Let's move to the NBA and the Celtics crushing the Bucks in Milwaukee. The 41-point home loss is the second largest in Bucks history. Boston now stands only 2 back of Milwaukee for the top seed in the East with 5 to play, and they own the head-to-head tiebreaker if that, comes into play. So, Tony, was last night's Celtics win big deal, little deal, no deal at all?
It's not no deal. It's not no deal. Even if Boston doesn't catch Milwaukee, and neither of us thinks that they will catch Milwaukee, it's not no deal. Now, to be fair, Milwaukee was playing in a back-to-back, which is hard. And they had put 149 points against Indiana. And it's very possible they sort of shrugged and said, we don't need to put out in this game, because last night's game was their 5th game in 7 days. But even with all that, these are the 2 best teams in the Eastern Conference, and they are likely to meet in the playoffs to go to the NBA Finals. So it's at least a little deal. I mean, that's my position here, is that when last year Boston eliminated Milwaukee from the playoffs, they beat them in Milwaukee in a Game 6, elimination game. They beat them in Boston in Game 7, elimination game. So when Milwaukee looks across the court at Boston, they're not looking at Orlando there. This is an important game. And even with all the rationales, even with the fact that it's a back-to-back, even with the fact that the tiebreaker probably doesn't come into play, if you go down by 49 points to your big rival, you cannot toss that off. I'm sorry.
That's the 2nd largest deficit in the NBA this season. So that's something. Tony, my first thought was that, okay, Milwaukee is too resilient. They can just sort of dismiss this. And then I actually did ask some people in the industry, former coaches and players about it, and they thought it was at least something. It was noteworthy because they're at home like this. And, Tony, look, the Celtics have made it a mission. They lost last year to Golden State, and they are the team that has sort of made it a mission all year long to get rid of this hurt by coming back and winning everything this year. And so, look, we only got 4 and 5 games left for some teams, 6 left for some. We're right there. And the playoffs have really sort of spiritually started, Tony. And I wonder if that was a tell last night for the Celtics. But you're right about this. I agree with you 100% in this. Milwaukee, they're looking across the court, and Boston saying, we're ready now. We're ready to go right now. We suffered this thing last year. We came up that short. Not going to happen. Let's go. And I wonder if that's the opening salvo of the Eastern Conference playoffs.
Cam Smith, the reigning British Open champion and highest-ranked player on the Saudi Tour, is looking forward to the Masters next week. Smith said, quote, I think for us internally, meaning the Saudi Tour, resume the quote, there's a lot of chatter going on about these guys don't play real golf anymore. And I think it's BS, to be honest. And we want to show people that, unquote. Wilbon, do you agree with this perception and the need for the Saudi Tour players to perform well at Augusta?
Well, I agree that that is the perception. I don't have that perception. But the Saudi Tour guys are right in that the PGA Tour guys, formerly their brethren, believe that about them. And they're saying it about it, that, you know, golf courses and tournaments and driving ranges, practice ranges across America. They are saying that. So, yeah, they're going to have to, they should take this personally. Look, Tony, I don't know if this was the case 40, 50 years ago, 75 years ago. I don't know. But everybody has to play every sport with a chip on their shoulder now. And everybody has to come in finding haters, real or perceived. And so everybody's got a little bit of Michael Jordan and LeBradford Smith out there now, no matter if there's nothing at stake. And that's just the way sports are contested now. And I get it, annoys me sometimes, but I get it. And I think, yeah, the live guys are it's time for them to own up. Let's see what they got. Let's see if they can take this on and take it a step further.
I agree with the perception. I agree with the fact of the perception. These guys are playing 54 holes. They got no cut, and they are guaranteed money. So I agree with all that. And I think that if they perform badly in the Masters, the PGA pros are going to look at them and just say, you guys are a bunch of clowns and you don't play anymore because you're guaranteed money wherever you go. Having said that, Mike, I would not be the slightest bit surprised if Dustin Johnson or Cam Smith won the Masters. Dustin Johnson won the Masters, I think, 3 years ago. And Cam Smith in his last 3 Masters finished 2nd, 10th, and 3rd. I do think there's pressure on them because there's world ranking points at stake. And this is the Saudi Tour guys' opportunity to go back at the PGA Tour guys, not just to throw a tee at them like Patrick Reed did, but to say we're as good as you, just like we always were. I think Patrick Reed has won it. He could win it again. They got 18 guys from the Saudi Tour playing in the Masters, and 8 of them have won majors. So I think it's a referendum. I think it's a put up or shut up time. I do. Let's take a break. Coming up, we will ask Jay Billis who he thinks has the edge between Florida Atlantic and San Diego State.
We'll also ask him whether we have underrated UConn, all of us, all season. UConn, man.
I know I have. I know I did.
Folks
I underrated them. I underrated the Big East,
I didn't pay them any attention. I didn't pay UConn any attention until like 3 weeks ago.
Let's get back into tomorrow's Final Four with our great friend from College Game Day, the impressively bald Jay Billis. So much better looking than both of us, Wilbon. All right, Jay, let's start with this. Wilbon is on the record as disliking the Final Four and being disinterested in this Final Four. Will you give him reasons to watch and pay attention?
Oh, I think there are great reasons, Tony, to watch this Final Four and pay attention to it. First is the first-time participants for both Florida Atlantic and Miami. I think this Final Four is a lot like 1983 when Jim Valvano's NC State team won it. Remember, we had Houston Phi Slamma Jamma against Louisville, the Doctors of Dunk, in the headliner game. And then the prelim, if you want to call it that, was NC State, Georgia. And nobody seemed to care about that first game, and that's the game where the national champion was, the NC State Wolfpack. And this is setting up in similar fashion. UConn is the prohibitive favorite to win this. They've won each of their games by 15 or more points. They've steamrolled everybody. And I think people are looking at this as Miami versus UConn is the de facto national championship game. But I think that glosses over the fact that both Florida Atlantic and San Diego State are really good. I think it's going to be compelling because all 4 of these teams can play. They play differently, but they can all play.
All right, Jay, for the record, I am not jazzed by the Final Four, and I'm more excited about watching Caitlin Clark against South Carolina than I am the men's matchup. But I'm going to watch and be happy about it. But let's go back to the first game for a second. Florida Atlantic and San Diego State. What do you see as sort of the key matchups in your mind? What are you looking forward to, the dynamic between those two?
I think it's high-powered offense, and Dusty May at Florida Atlantic, they run some really good offense, especially in transition. They don't go to the deep corners like a lot of teams do, but they have multiple guys that can grab a rebound and bring it up themselves, so they don't have to outlet it, and they can really shoot it. They drive it. They're great passers. It's probably the best passing and cutting team. Probably Florida Atlantic and UConn are the 2 best at it. Against San Diego State, which is a smash-mouth defensive team. I mean, they came out for their practice on Friday in this big arena, and most teams come out and they're shooting right away. They came out and did a violent blockout drill. So it just sort of sets the stage that they're going to be the physical team full of seniors and grown men that know where the weight room is, and they're going to get their tempo. They're like the Virginia of the West Coast in that way. They're going to get it to be a slower game, and the team that does a better job on the glass of getting second shots, getting loose balls, I think is going to wind up winning the game. If it gets into the mid-60s, I'll be shocked.
Jay, is it possible we're going to look back at UConn having rolled people and having just beaten non-conference opponents into the ground all year? Are we going to look back at UConn and say, oh, my God, they were great and it just took us too long to figure it out?
Yes, I do think so. So it reminds me a little bit of 2011 when Kemba Walker was there. UConn lost. I think they were 9-9 in the Big East that year, but the only games that they lost were Big East games. They won every non-conference game in the Maui Invitational, obviously the NCAA tournament. And this is setting up a lot like that. They don't have a Kemba Walker, but they've got great talent across the board. They're really deep. And if UConn wins the championship, this will be their 5th title since 1999. and it will be their 5th title with 3 different coaches. I can't think of a program that's done that in that short a period of time with 3 different captains at the helm. I think we'll have to put UConn with the Blue Bloods, but your point to this year, they were unranked before the season because people really didn't know what they had at the point guard position with Tristan Newton transferring in. And then they were ranked number 1 at the end of November and then went into a slide where they lost 6 of 8. But they cracked the code, and nobody's been better in this tournament. It hasn't been close. They've dominated everybody.
I will get you out of here on this real quick. You're probably too smart to be with us on Monday, so this is the last appearance on this. Do we put you down for UConn as the ultimate winner, Jay? Is that what you're saying?
Well, first, your Monday show will be the poorer for it. You'll have to call it 5 lesser minutes. Yeah, I think UConn's the best team. I do think they'll win it, but I really believe that 1983 thing has some legs. That, you know, how many times have we come into this Final Four thinking we knew who was going to win, and then the team that was in what some would call the prelim game winds up winning it? You know, one of San Diego State or Florida Atlantic are going to play for the national championship, and they're both dangerous in different ways. But if UConn plays its best, Jordan Hawkins is ill right now. He didn't come to practice today. They kept him at the hotel. If he's compromised, something crazy could happen. But if UConn plays well, they're going to win it.
Thank you, Jay, as always.
Thanks,
Thank
Jay.
you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
You can catch Jay on a 4-hour edition of College Game Day tomorrow. 4 hours, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern. Let's take one last break. Still to come, Shohei gets it done, but the Angels do not.
Where have we heard that before the last half decade? And will the Suns, with Tony just commandeering the bandwagon to drive it himself, handle the Nuggets tonight here in the desert?
That's exactly right. That's right. And by the way, we should say 5 great minutes with Jay, because if he thinks it's going to be left.
People are.
Happy time, people. Happy 58th birthday, Tom Barrasso. Barrasso was a Pittsburgh Penguins goalie when they won back-to-back Stanley Cups in 1991 and 92. Now, that team had Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr, so you could pretty much put any goalie out there and he'd be playing with elite. Barrasso became the youngest goalie to ever win the Vezina Trophy in 1984 with Buffalo when he was just 18 years old. That season, Barrasso was also Rookie of the Year. He played 19 years in the NHL with Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Ottawa, Carolina, Toronto, and St. Louis. The Massachusetts native was the first American-born goalie to win 300 NHL games. He finished with 369 wins, and he's one of only 6 American-born goalies to win 300.
Tony, I saw a lot of one of those series in the early 90s when Pittsburgh won. They beat the Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup Finals. If you had asked me before today, how long was Barrasso in the league? How many great years did he have? I was thinking it was a great but compacted period of time. Like he played 8 years and he had 4 good seasons. No, way wrong on this guy. Sneaky great, huh?
Sneaky great. Happy anniversary, DeMar DeRozan. On this day last year, the Bulls guard scored 50 points in an overtime win against the Clippers. DeRozan thus became the 14th different player to reach 50 in the 2022 season, an NBA record. But just this last Wednesday, Jrue Holiday became the 14th different player to hit 50 this season when he got 51 against Indiana. And there are 10 days left in the regular season to set a new record. So far this season, Luka Doncic has 4 50-point games. Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard have 3 each. But to put things in perspective, Wilt Chamberlain had 45 50-point games in a 1961-62 season. That's right, 45.
As my dear friend Jalen Rose likes to say, there's a record book for Wilt, and there's one for everyone else. And don't forget it, boys and girls. Wilt, bow your head, and then start talking about the others.
Happy trails to just 2 base stealers. There were 21 stolen bases on opening day yesterday. That's the most on opening day since 1907. Yeah, 1907. Only 2 would-be stealers were thrown out for a success rate of 91.3%, which surely will encourage base stealing. On average, the length of game was 35 minutes less than opening day last year. Of the 15 games, 10 were finished in under 3 hours. 2 games took only 2 hours and 14 minutes. The Yankees beat the Giants in 2 hours, 33 minutes, which is the shortest amount of time it has taken the Yankees to win at home in 180 games. And banning infield shifts is expected to increase ground ball hits by 2,000. This is all good news.
Yeah, I guess it's good news, a good sign. I saw there were some 3-hour-plus games, too. But they're moving in the right direction. You can't conquer the world overnight. I think it was a good start.
One clarification, Wilbon was technically right. Michigan State beat Indiana State by 11, but it was larger than that throughout most of the second half.
Just right.
Let's go to the big finish. The Bruins beat the Blue Jackets to wrap up the President's Trophy. Is that significant?
No, because the team that win the President's Trophy often goes out early in the Stanley Cup playoffs, so I don't know that it is. Shohei threw 6 scoreless, struck out 10, left the game with a 1-0 lead, but of course the Angels still lost. Your thoughts?
Every game like this gets Shohei Ohtani that much closer to free agency. Wolves center Naz Reid out indefinitely after suffering a broken wrist. Is that a big deal?
Huge deal, because his statistical contribution, it doesn't measure up to his real contribution with energy and defense. And man, big blow for them. North Texas won the NIT. You impressed?
Not really. You know, honestly, it should be a tournament just for mid-majors. Last one, Nuggets at Suns tonight. Who you got? I got the Suns.
Well, Murray and Jokic are questionable. So, I don't know. I'm going to take the Suns at home. Big night, a lot of hype. Kevin Durant on the court. And, Tony, you're driving the bandwagon.
They're out there
you're driving 50. The bandwagon.
I got Kevin Durant. We're out of time. Try and do better the next time. I'm Tony Kornheiser.
I'm Mike Wilbon. Have a great weekend, Knuckleheads. You can get the podcast on the app or Apple Podcasts.